This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/RubyRogues. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel we have Dave Kimura.
Hey everybody.
Eric Berry.
It is very nice to be here.
David Richards.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. I'm going to take just a second and tell people go check out React Dev Summit coming up. If you're into React. Yeah, I know this is not a JavaScript podcast, but it's what I'm working on. So if you want to come see great React talks, go check that out. We've got some really terrific people coming to speak. We have a special guest this week, and that is Catherine Meyers. Catherine, do you want to say hi?
Hey.
Now, I watched your RubyConf talk, and that's why you're on this episode. Do you want to just give us a brief introduction to who you are, and then we can dive into the content?
Sure. So I am a software engineer at a company called MavenLink here in San Francisco. And I'm also a co-organizer of a meetup called Women Level Up. And all of this coding stuff came after a huge career change. And before coding, I was actually an opera singer. Nice. And that's me in a nutshell.
Prove it.
We'll work up to that.
Okay, sounds good.
So how does that work? Did you just wake up one day and be like, you know what? I've always liked computers. You know what? I want to start programming. So what's the story behind that?
Oh, gosh, it was the opposite of that. So I decided to leave the opera industry first. And basically that was after a lifetime of being a musician. I was the kid who was always singing and dancing everywhere. And it was just a natural progression that I would go into the arts. And that was my life and my identity. And I went to school for it. And then I sang professionally throughout my 20s. And eventually, as I got closer to 30, the lifestyle of a starving artist wasn't as romantic and lovely as it once was. And that combined with other factors and all the sacrifice that goes into it and what the reality of a career as a musician is, made me decide I needed to leave. I wasn't happy anymore.
Let's real quick talk about that, because I remember seeing your talk. Tell us who you performed for and where you performed at, to give us more context.
Sure, yeah. So when I was singing professionally, I sang for a lot of regional companies, especially in New York and DC and Philly. And I sang recitals. My favorite was at Symphony Stage in New York, a whole entire recital based on like 1920s Paris and 1930s Paris and all the composers that were there during that time, which is awesome. Yeah, and I got to do some fun stuff. I got to sing the national anthem at a Nationals Mets game. And I sang at the vice president's residence at a Christmas party, which was very cool. It was a big honor to be able to sing for the vice president. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm curious.
Damn that 30 years old, man. That 30
That's where it all kind of clicks, right? You're like, hey, life, 401k, what's that?
Well, I think it's interesting too. You know, you went from that to code. I have a brother-in-law who is an opera singer, and he performed at some region, with some regional groups as well. And what happened is his wife got pregnant, and same kind of thing, right? It's like, oh, I got to pay to live. I can't afford to live on what they can pay me, and so he went and got a teaching certificate. And he teaches high school music, and so I'm wondering, how do you make the leap from opera to programming? Because it seems like the one is a more natural progression, I guess.
Oh,
than the other.
definitely. Yeah, and I actually taught music as my day job the entire time I was singing professionally, and but I didn't love it enough to make that career switch. And if you're going to go into teaching, you have to love it. And I just didn't love it enough. And so I was starting with a blank slate. And for a full year, I did not know what I was going to do. I spent a year doing a lot of research into different industries. And first I thought maybe I wanted to go into marketing or PR or something creative and in that type of way. And it was actually my friends who suggested coding. And the first person who suggested coding to me is another fellow singer, Tyler Wayne Smith, who did the same thing and left the opera world for the tech industry. He was actually singing on Broadway in Chicago. And same thing, left the industry, went into the tech world. And he was the first one to say, "Hey, Catherine, have you ever thought of learning how to code?" And I laughed in his face. I honestly laughed in his face. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm an opera singer. Why in the world would I be good at coding?"
So I've been trying to get my wife to start programming as well, and she has that kind of same reaction, laughs in my face. So what kind of tips can you give me to kind of make someone who is not interested in coding to maybe just give it a chance?
So my brother asked me a really good question to see if I would like coding. And he asked me if I liked puzzles. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I love puzzles." And he was like, "Well, do you also working towards a problem? Do you love solving that problem and want to give someone a high five after?" I'm like, "Yeah." And that really helped. And I think people think that it is so inaccessible. People have this stereotype of what a coder is, that dude sitting in the corner and who's just a genius. And it's not as inaccessible as that. Is it hard? Yes, definitely. I worked my buns off to change careers. But it's not as inaccessible as people think. And it's a lot of fun to build things. And there's a way you can introduce yourself to it and see if you like it. And that's exactly what I did. I started teaching myself stuff. And that was after another friend recommended it to me as well and told me about the idea of boot camps. And this was 3.5 years ago, when boot camps weren't as big as they are now. And so another friend told me about boot camps and how I could, facilitate my career change in a more timely manner than going back full time to school for another 4 years. And so I actually stopped laughing at the idea, and started really thinking about it. And I remember that I had actually taught myself HTML once when I was working at a nonprofit music school in Harlem, one of my many, many day jobs working as a singer. And of course, they didn't have anyone to update their website. So I taught myself HTML and started updating the website. And I actually really liked it and probably spent too much time on that and started trying to reformat things when I had no clue what I was doing. But so I just started teaching myself and had the goal then to get into Flatiron School, which is a boot camp in New York.
Cool.
Yeah. Flatiron School is a terrific school too. Avi is a terrific guy, and the campus.
Yes.
Did you actually attend the campus in New York City?
I did. I was actually attending before they had launched Learn.co. Okay. So attending on campus was the only option at the time, and I loved it. I am so glad that I tried as hard as I did to get into that school. I didn't get in the first time. I definitely had to prove to them that, yeah, an opera singer is going to like coding. But I mean, hey, this is something I get from opera world. You tell me no, that's no big deal. You're going to get 99 no's before you get to a yes in music or any arts field. And so that was no big deal to me. My reaction to that was like, okay, I'll prove to them. And I just worked harder and applied again and got in.
That's awesome. I just also want to point out,
Cool.
they've got a terrific space over there at Flatiron, right by Veteran Park on Manhattan. I stopped in and looked around. They were having a hackathon at the time. Not last year, but the year before. And they do good work there. So
They definitely do. And they've kept the quality high from what I can see, which is hard to do as you're expanding.
Yep.
It seems like, as I listen to you, that being able to write code is very accessible once you're in, but it takes that resilience. And it's interesting. I try to encourage people, you've got what it takes, but you've got to put it out there first and get started, and then it'll be fine. And it seems like you've taken that, you've learned that, you've been able to live that really well. And that seems to have worked really well for you.
Thanks. Yeah. And again, that's something I learned from opera. As a musician, you have to be incredibly resilient. Nobody is going to spoon feed you anything, and you're going to have uphill battles wherever you go. And it's up to you to advance your career. You're sitting alone in a practice room for hours upon hours, and you're going to hear no a lot of times. And it's up to you to say, okay, I'm going to work harder and I'm going to keep at this. And musicians sit down and they go over the same four measures of music over and over and over again until they get those four measures perfect. So we're used to that patience. We're used to that hard work to really achieve what we want to.
Nice. I was in a conversation yesterday with somebody, and it seems to be an ongoing theme in my life right now. We were talking about bringing our best self to work and being willing to, doesn't matter what people say, just find a way to be my best self and make that contribution. Nobody's going to give me permission. Mm-hmm. So, and this person was overcoming that. And so we were encouraging each other, and I was giving him experiences from my life of, you just have to put yourself out there and see what you can do and then improve that.
And have faith in yourself.
Absolutely.
A lot of my jump into coding was faith that I could do that. And if I can memorize a 3-hour opera in a different language, then and that gives you a lot more confidence of what you can learn and the information you can hold.
Absolutely. Yes.
So one of the things that you talked about in last year's Ruby conference, the Ruby Hack conference, is the correlation between developers and musicians. And I'd love to hear you expound on that.
Yeah. So I had kind of had an idea of the soft skills that might transfer over. The things like resilience and patience and being able to communicate and collaborate with many different people. As a musician, you have to be able to talk with rich patrons. You have to be able to talk with the stagehands. You have to talk with some crazy conductors and directors, and be able to communicate with many different types of people. And that is something that you need as a coder as well, especially this day and age where there's a lot more collaboration going on, and especially at Maven Link, we pair program. So communication is key. Yeah. And so I kind of knew about more of like the soft skills but I didn't know about the connections that would help me technically. I didn't think there was going to be any connection. I didn't think that being a musician was going to help me technically. And it wasn't until I was starting to learn how to code that I started seeing those connections, and they really surprised me. When I switched careers, I thought, hey, if I'm going to be successful in this, it's going to be in spite of my background. And what I found is that no, that is not the case at all. My background was really helping me, both in the soft skills and technically. And I think the thing that really brought that to light for me was patterns. Patterns are what really hit home for me. I remember I was sitting in class at Flatiron School, and I was doing really well. I was answering all the questions. I knew exactly which files to bring up to build our new model and all of its routes and its controller and how to write the methods and where everything was going. And then I remember the teacher stopped me and said, okay, so what's going on behind the curtain here? Like, why is this working? And I actually couldn't answer that question. And I was like, what in the world is happening here that I can just like spit out all of this information? And I didn't really know what was going on. And I realized it was just because there were patterns. And musicians are trained to recognize and memorize and replicate patterns. We can spit out patterns with the best of them. And what is code? It is patterns. If you get down to the most basic form of syntax and vocabulary and how you build a method, that is a pattern. If you look at bigger, more high level architecture, how things flow through an MVC architecture, that is a pattern. So I've noticed that I can do that part really, really well. I have to slow myself down and actually remember to ask myself, oh, do I know what's going on? But yeah, that was the biggest connection for me at first. And then as I started doing more research into music and the brain, the information I was reading was blowing my mind. And I totally nerded out on all of the research that's been done on music and the brain. And there's been a lot. I think my favorite study that I read about, they actually created a metal-free keyboard so that they could study the brain of a jazz pianist during an MRI. I thought that was super cool.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Would you say that developers are inversely? So you're saying that musicians have a better chance of understanding code and probably an advantage as a developer. I remember when we were at that conference, you asked who here is a musician, and probably 80 or 90% of the people raised their hands. That there was like a mind explosion for me. I literally was sitting there and my mind exploded. And I thought, why am I not a musician? So I hadn't tried it. So would you say that developers actually are also possibly better musicians or have a possibility of being a better musician?
I kind of think so, yes. I have absolutely, I mean, all the evidence I have is exactly what you were saying. When I go to conferences, and I've given this talk now at 3 different conferences, and I always ask, okay, who here is a musician? And it's always like 70, 80%. And that blows everybody's mind. It gets really, really messy when everybody's brain explodes in there. Yeah. But it's true. And so that's the only evidence I have, is that there must be this huge connection, because there's so many coders who are also musicians. And does it make you a better musician? I have no idea. All those people who are raising their hands could suck, but I highly doubt it.
All right. So here's
I
what
totally suck.
Here's what I propose. Here's what I propose. And I actually came prepared for this one. I propose that we do a live on podcast test. And I came prepared. I brought food.
Oh my God.
And so I'm going to play.
You should have told me. I would have brought mine.
Totally over there. All right. So here we go. I'm going to attempt to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, and I want all the rogues to sing.
Yes.
Oh.
I support this.
We can edit this out, guys. It's all right.
Hold on. Let me give you the starting note.
There's lag over
That's
the
your
internet.
starting
This
note.
is going to be awesome.
All right. Hey, Chuck, are you able to kick Barry off the podcast?
Hey!
I'm going to
I think
conduct
so.
you.
Let me see.
There we go.
Yeah, this is why we should be doing a video broadcast instead of a. This is going to be the first ever live show of the Rogues singing Mary Had a Little Lamb with a cheap little flute pipe, bamboo flute pipe from Portugal. Here we go. Ready? Here we go.
Mary had a little lamb. Okay.
Little lamb, little lamb.
Little lamb.
Mary had a
I think we're all
little
off
lamb.
here.
This is white as snow.
No. Bravo, bravo. Guys, I smell brandy.
No, I
really
think
do.
that your theory is wrong, by the way. Good news. It's the way around, but it's only a one-way path. It's not a duplex.
Well,
I do have a counterpoint to that, though.
yeah.
I'll say that if I have a really, really good day, what I'll do is I'll go hike and I'll go up in a big slot canyon somewhere and I'll bring my Native American flute and I'll just play to myself for a few hours. And it feels like I'm in the zone for coding. It's that feeling of I am connected with what I'm creating and I'm confident with what I'm creating. And nobody can hear me, but it sounds really good in a slot canyon. It can sound really good. And so no, there is a correlation.
Well,
even if I can't sing on cue.
The other thing that I'll point out, though, is that so I was in choir in high school. I told him I was a bass. I'm a tenor. Anyway, I mean, we practiced a lot. I think a lot of times we just assume that music's one of those innate talents. And I think to a certain degree, people have an aptitude for it. A lot of people have a better ear for it. But when it comes right down to it, it's a lot of practice. It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of preparing. And so, the people who kind of poo-poo the connection, they really don't understand that, when you're preparing for an opera, you're singing and thinking and, practicing pronunciation for hours to make sure that you're ready for it. And we do the same thing with code. It's just that most of our practice actually goes into production, which is a little bit scary if you think about it.
We have a different type of production.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But the other thing that I would point out with a lot of this is that I think people, they come into the community and they see people get up and talk about the technology and things like that. But at RubyConf, you spoke at RubyConf. In past years, one of the big fun events was actually watching the jam session with people like the late Jim Wyrick and, Chad Fowler and some of these other folks. Jim would pull out his ukulele and a bunch of other folks would get up there with their guitars and stuff. And we'd all have a rousing singing time, after the conference. And
we need to resurrect that.
we should. We totally should.
Yes.
But I think what you're talking about here and the parallels that you draw in the talk are really somewhat profound as far as, look, this is a thing that we all enjoy. We all do, music. We may not be great at it, as Eric made us all demonstrate, but, it's a part of who we are. And what you're talking about with that perseverance and that practice and the patterns and everything else, it really, really, it really pays off, and it really comes full circle. So what can we learn? Not just is there aptitude from music to programming, but what can we learn from music to programming as far as the practice and the patterns and how we think about these things. One last thing that you brought up that I wanted to comment on, I had all these things come to my head, was you mentioned the patterns and how natural it felt in Rails. Well, when David was writing Rails, he went to the book Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture by Martin Fowler, and that's where he came out with Active Record, and that's where he came out with MVC. And so all of these patterns were actual patterns that people had studied, that Martin had seen in other applications and pulled out and recognized, and that inspired David to write Rails the way that he did. So all of the things that you're talking about, they all apply. And so, so I'm wondering, where do you see that people could take some of the knowledge and practices that you have in music and recognize that, hey, this might make me a better coder?
That's a really good question. And I've only ever seen the the benefits after the fact. But I think that anyone who can practice music and do that training will be benefited by that. Like not only in strengthening your pattern recognition, but more physiological changes as well to your brain that can help with things like problem solving. They did a study on musicians' brains where they were studying the corpus callosum, which is a part of the brain that connects the right and left hemisphere. And what they realized is when you're creating music, you're using almost every part of your brain, especially the auditory and visual and motor cortices. And what they found was that musicians actually have a larger corpus callosum, which meant they could send messages between the right and left hemispheres in faster and more diverse routes. And what that meant in real life is that they were better problem solvers. That connection really helped musicians think quickly and break down problems quickly and think of different solutions to those problems. And if you can pick up an instrument and start learning, there are things that are going to be happening in your brain that you don't even realize. And so you're going to get these side effects that you don't expect. And it can really help with coding.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So
that reminds me, my good days with math are creative, and the most of my days with math are logical. So usually I don't try to bring both of that, and so I think that makes sense. And the fact that there can be a venue to learn how to do that, knowing that it's true, and knowing that I want that, and knowing that I don't know how to get that. So okay, pick up an instrument and practice, train to get that, because that's where it comes from. That both sides of me, all of me, has to be able to participate, be creative in problem solving, that's actually really got me excited.
Yeah, and it gives you a little bit more of a justification for, hey, I think I want to learn the piano, but I have so much, to do at work, and shouldn't I be reading more blog posts, and I think this can kind of give you permission to learn an instrument and explore new things, because it's going to make you a better coder.
I'm going to take a drum set into work and start banging around saying, look, guys, this is R&D right here, okay? Step
That's
back.
right.
I see
boss,
absolutely
it's
no
science.
negative consequences for that.
So with composing music, you say it hits that thing that starts with the C and bridge and gaps and stuff. I'm not going to pretend like I can repronounce that. But is there also a correlation with that same kind of thing with listening to music and the kind of music that you listen to, that maybe it can just map your brain temporarily or whatever to a place where you're able to more clearly solve a problem?
Yes, definitely. And there's been many studies on listening to music as well as creating music. And when they look at a brain that is listening to music, it is way more active than a brain that is not. And different people react to different types of music differently. I'm sure there are a lot of people who love to code while listening to music. But it really can help activate your brain. A lot of people talk about getting into the zone while they're listening to music. For me, I love listening to music. If I can put on my headphones and put on classical or jazz or even rock, like I can get into the zone. It can help me focus and help stimulate my brain.
Yeah, I like Marconi Union for that. I'll grab, but I play around with different kinds of music, and there's probably 100 kinds of music, but I always have my headphones on, and I always want to concentrate, and I'm looking for something that's going to enhance that experience for me.
I have a pretty strange taste in music. It's usually bouncing between Linkin Park, the Cranberries, or Doctor Who theme music. So it's really kind of out there, but I found the classical, which is kind of like the Doctor Who theme music, really helps me focus the most. because I'm not getting distracted by the words or the melodies that's coming in from Linkin Park or the Cranberries.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Chuck and Eric? What kind of music do y'all listen to while coding, if any?
For you, the listeners of Ruby Rogues, Loot Crate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Loot Crate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out Loot Crate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings.
I listen to the same thing every time. I have a favorite song list that I just put on repeat, and there's probably 20 songs in there, all upbeat, all dance music. And the reason I have that is because I've listened to the song so many times that it's almost like a conditioned response. When you listen to this certain song, it puts you into a zone. And I found that. And plus, I love dancing while coding, right? That's why I love standing desks, because I can like dance. And I look like a total weirdo at hacker conferences or anywhere where there's other developers. I'm sitting here like, I am a freaking good butt dancer here. And a highly unappreciated butt dancer. But yeah, that's what actually drives me into it. So yeah, same set of songs. A lot of Imagine Dragons, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I attest. I've also been a dancer while coding. Yeah, it's fun. Also, sometimes embarrassing, but
good music.
I just keep the door closed. It's okay. I'll dance all the time. I've got a
own it.
Full wall mirror in one of the rooms I code, and so I'll not only dance, but I'm dancing to the mirror and having fun. And it's a good way to code.
Somebody needs to create a website where you can just live stream dancing coders, where you don't actually do the code that they're building, but you just view like a side view of them just boogieing out, and it only triggers when they start dancing, and just have a stream of like hundreds of dancing coders. Yeah.
That'll definitely bring more people to this industry. Oh, people look like they're having fun.
Yeah. Yeah, my musical tastes kind of range. It depends on what I feel like. Sometimes I really need to focus, and I'll listen to. There's a program out there called Focus at Will, and it is kind of. I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of the traditional Eastern music, with different rhythms and things like that. And if I'm in the mood and I put that on, that's usually when I get really deep into the cycles of coding and getting stuff done. If not that, then a lot of times I'll also just pick up. I grew up listening to country music, and so I'll just put some songs on that I know really well. I tend to, if it's a newer song that I don't know as well, I tend to find myself trying to understand the words instead of write the code. But if it's something I'm very, very familiar with, then I can get into the groove that way. And so I'll just play something off of my computer. And then, yeah, I've done a lot of classical music. There's a set of albums out there on iTunes that are like the masters of classical music, and they're like 10 albums, and it cost me like $10 to get all 10 albums or something when I bought it. And so I'll just run some of that. I have this deep love for Italian opera because I lived in Italy for 2 years. And so a lot of times I'll just play something by Puccini or something. Anyway, so yeah, just, or I'll play some Vivaldi, which is more classical, not opera, but still. Yeah, so it just depends on my mood, really. It's funny. We all have kind of different patterns for how we do that.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a radio program I listened to a few years ago. They're talking about Beethoven, and they're saying how, when he put on a show, he put on the show. He had to market it. He had to write the music. He had to hire He had to train. He had to get everything set up. It was all up to him. He had to compose it. He had to, everything. And I feel like, these great artists who created great things, they used a lot of the same tools and tricks that coders have to use to be able to organize things, to make things happen. So it seems like, I don't know, a camaraderie there. I haven't done anything great like Beethoven's done, but I've felt that the whole part of me, all of me has to come to my life and have to find a way to produce something worthwhile and make it work. And I like that about coding, by the way. I mean, that's just, we're generalists and we're able to make something great and do it with panache. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think one of the great things about coding and music is that in both places, you have to really hold a lot of information in your brain at the same time. When you are making a change to your code, you could be breaking 20 other things, and you really have to keep all of that information in your brain. Mm-hmm. Musicians have to do that as well. When I was up on stage in an opera, not only did I have to know, the music I was singing, and the words I was singing, which most of the time were in a different language, there was also the acting. There was the direction where I was going to go on stage. I had to always keep an eye on the conductor, in case the conductor decided they wanted to take it a little bit faster this time. I had to make sure I didn't fall off the stage, and fall into a tuba. There's so many different things that you have to keep in your head at the same time. So you get really good at thinking about a million different things and never letting the audience know that you are doing that.
I like that. And that kind of reminds me, because I've never been on an opera stage, but I kind of get what you're talking about, when I've had a few good moments in my life. And sometimes I feel like, I'm coding and I'm just going to go do the next 20 hours of my life doing this thing. And I just, I put in a B effort or a C effort instead of doing like an A effort, a full effort, be fully present for maybe 4 hours. And so it seems like, being whole and being connected and then just bringing it doesn't have to take me some marathon experience if I'm present.
Yeah. And that's the difference between working hard and working smart, right? As an opera singer, I had to make sure I was working smart, because if I was singing and I wasn't focused, I could hurt myself. If I wasn't fully supporting my sound and really making sure I was using my technique in an efficient way, I could hurt myself. So I had to make sure that I was always focused. That's the difference between smart and hard.
Love it. Cool. Mm-hmm. And it's always an excuse for me too. I'll just put in an extra hour after everybody leaves the office. Like, no, I had things to do that hour.
Yeah.
Or I need a rest. Or what am I doing to myself? No, just pay attention, get it done. It's all right.
Yeah, it's really easy in our society to pat ourselves on the back for working so many hours, when in reality, work smarter, dude. You can do it in fewer hours if you really try.
And you're talking to one of the dumbest guys on the planet with this particular problem, and so like I'm talking about it because I'll do that. I'll put in these crazy hours, and I'm like, God, Dave, just come on, Dave. Anyway, it's good to work smart.
That's why they say hiring working moms is actually incredibly smart, because they don't have the time to not work efficiently. They have tons to do. So if you hire a working mom, you are going to get way more work in way less time.
I thought you said working mimes, and I thought, okay, this is
I'm not sure where this is going, but yeah.
Either way, I agree. Either way.
If you have an open office and you feel like it's too loud, just hire a working mime.
There we go.
Problem solved.
There you go. No, I love that about working moms, though. That's the thing. I think the way that the working moms I've known are amazing at what they can balance and get done, and be present. That's awesome.
Well, and to that point, when talking about some of the advantages that musicians get and, the different backgrounds that we've talked about and things like that, I think a lot of times we talk about diversity in technology as, oh, well, everybody's the same. But in fact, the strength of diversity is the fact that everybody's different. Everybody brings something different. And that's the power, right? It's like, oh, we don't have somebody who thinks that way. Mm-hmm. How can we benefit by that? Not how do we find somebody that fits into the same mold that everybody else does? Now, we want everybody to get along, sure, but, what are we missing out on by not having a musician and woodworker and, somebody who likes to work on cars and, and they see these problems that shape out in different ways because they have different experiences and have spent time developing different skills.
Yeah, I'm going to come at a problem in a very different way than someone with a more stereotypical background. And that's going to result in a better solution.
Yep. 2
heads are better than one, and 2 very different heads are even better than that.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a little bit of courage if I'm a manager or a leader in an environment where people are different to bring that up. To celebrate the differences. Sometimes it's really easy for me to see somebody just like me and ooh, I want them on my team.
Yeah.
No, I don't want them on team. I'm already on there. I'll handle that part. So what else am I missing?
Yeah, and it's a natural thing to want to surround yourself with people like yourself. It's going to be slightly easier for you to communicate, but you are going to be better off for surrounding yourself with people who are different. You're going to learn how to communicate better, and you're going to come up with better solutions.
Yeah. And in the long run, I tend to resent the sycophants. If they're just like me, they want to please me. I don't want to be pleased. I want to put a good product out there. I want to work well together. So yeah, long term, it just gets boring. It just gets annoying.
You should hire more New Yorkers. We'll never tell you what you want to know. What you want to hear.
But at the same time, I think it's also important to, yes, hire different people that are very different from you, but that doesn't mean that you can't have the same core values.
Right.
That you can, be on the same page about things that really matter in both your lives. And I think having that common basis, you can be a musician and then someone completely not a musician like myself and get along and be able to work great while bringing the diversity or difference of opinions into the mix.
As long as you're bringing respect to the table, then
Yeah.
Come together. You both want to work hard. You both want to build this thing. Yeah.
I think the core values argument is actually critical to this, because if you're coming in with different core values, you're not just gonna approach things differently. You're going to be working toward different ends, and things will fall apart. But if you can find people that have the same core values as you and think about problems differently from you, I mean, that's where the magic is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't mean core values as a political sense, but, wanting to do the work, that you being on time and working hard is important. Having family time and time outside of work is important. Like those kind of core values.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And even if you get down into, a more tech type core values of, speed versus readability versus
tags versus spaces.
Tags.
Yeah, you can use any editor you want as long as it's Emacs.
Well, that is a rule, isn't it?
In my company, yes. I'm just kidding.
Maybe in Utah. You folk are strange out there.
No. Don't wrap me in that crazy bundle.
They're not bundles.
Actually, I'm not that hardcore. I use Spacemacs.
They should have a label on there for Emacs. You must have masochistic tendencies to enjoy.
I think you nailed it for me there.
Or full ring exchange, right? You're getting married essentially. So
just use Space Max, then you can edit in Vim and have Emacs in the background. You don't even have to know it. Yeah. I don't know. It's a way.
Very cool. So I'm a little bit curious. I love kind of the science behind a lot of this too, and it seems like there are studies and people who work on this kind of brain science. How do you go about approaching a study like this? I mean, you see the connection, but how do you go about verifying it?
You mean as a scientist?
Yeah. So
you mean the people doing the studies?
Yeah. How do you go find these studies about brain science?
Oh, how did I find them?
Yeah.
I Googled it. Let me Google that for you. Literally, I when I was doing research for this talk, I was just Googling, and there's a lot out there. And you can find the actual papers written up by the scientists, and you can try and read those. That's a little bit more difficult than finding the articles written about the study. Right. So a lot of times I would, I would read the study and then find an article written about it, and that explained it so much more nicely. Yeah. But yeah, that was really what I did. I found so much interesting stuff. And it was all just from Googling.
Did you find anything that really surprised you?
Yeah. I think all the stuff about the brain and how the brain could actually physically change is what really surprised me. I'll give you another fun fact. So they did a study on pianists, and they found something about the central sulcus. And the central sulcus is a groove in your brain that goes across the right and left hemispheres, and it's what can really indicate if you're right or left-handed. The left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and vice versa. And what they know is that, hey, if that central sulcus, if that groove is deeper on the left side of your brain, then you're right-handed. If it's deeper on the right side of the brain, then you're left-handed. And when they studied the brains of pianists, they actually found that the central sulcus was more symmetrical. And these weren't people who said, oh, yeah, that's because I'm ambidextrous. These were people who identified as right-handed or left-handed. And what they found from that is that playing the piano, which is a practice where you really have to strengthen your weak side to match your dominant side. If you're right-handed, you need to really strengthen your left hand so that you can play as well with your left hand as your right hand and as evenly. So all of that work to really balance out their right and left hands physically changed their brain and gave them a more symmetrical central sulcus. And that blew my mind. The fact that we can physically change our brains with music training, it's incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm full of fun facts. I love all that science stuff.
Which came first, the pianist or the egg? I mean, okay, that was terrible. Anyway, but the idea is for me it's okay. So is our mental makeup a result of what we do, or is what we do a result of our mental makeup? And it turns out that it's both. There's a terrific book out there. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being You. And it talks about this kind of physical stasis that we get to. We're kind of comfortable. He uses the word addicted. We're addicted to being ourselves. And that as you go and you change what you do, you change your behaviors, you change what you eat, what where you go, what you do, who you interact with, that changes your body chemistry. And then you become addicted to your new you, and the old you doesn't exist anymore. And it's interesting, it's a feedback cycle. It's not just, oh, well, I was made this way, and so I can never change.
Yeah. In the whole nature versus nurture argument, I mean, nurture is so strong. So much you can do to change. And that's why having a growth mindset is so important. And I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of growth versus fixed mindset. That is something that, oh goodness, I'm going to forget. Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck came up with this, and this idea that, someone with a fixed mindset thinks that what they can do is what they can do. They're good at what they're good at. They're bad at what they're bad at. And that's that. And they tend to see failure as the end of the game. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset thinks that they always have the ability to learn and grow. And, so the fact that you can change your brain and like you were saying, change your whole body by the different ways that you act in this world and what you do, that fixed mindset is just, it's not going to help you because there's so much that you can do if you just go out there having faith that, yeah, I'm going to learn this thing and get better at it.
I've been writing a blog article. The title is "You didn't come this far to come this far," and it's this thing we're talking about. Look at what we've done to get here, and look at the kind of mindset it took to be, able to learn these things and to accomplish what we have. And however it looked, we got here, and so now what are we going to do? Because it's so easy for us. I don't know. It's easy for me, to say, well, I've arrived, or I plateau somehow, or good enough, or that's out of my control. No, it's not. Let's stay engaged. There's plenty to do, and we can do it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love most about coding is there's always something to learn. Sometimes that's also what I hate most about coding. It can be very overwhelming, all the things you don't know. But that's also what excites me. I never want to stop learning. And with coding, there's always something to learn.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the one thing that we didn't talk about yet is now the Ruby Rogues band played live here.
Yeah.
So
we're sorry.
I would love to.
There's a smile on Eric's face that's got me scared already.
If you're okay with this, I would love to hear you opera sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb."
In my full-on opera voice.
Your full-on opera voice, if you're okay with it.
Sure.
That's how it's done, right?
I don't think I've ever sung Mary Had a Little Lamb in a full-on opera voice.
You can do it in Latin if you prefer.
We have a top-notch accompanist for you.
Yeah, can you get out your flute? Come on.
Oh, I don't think you're ruining your song.
Okay. All right. Mary Had a Little Lamb in an opera voice. Ready?
Ready.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece as white as snow.
Wow.
Oh,
I had to give you a very dramatic version.
No, I was tearing up a little bit,
I feel a little bit inadequate now.
If this were a real opera, I would now kill myself or die of tuberculosis. That is normally what happened to my characters at the end.
This kind of makes a point I was thinking I wanted to make, which was, we were talking about, in coding, we're always learning something and having the confidence to go anyway. And here we are, Mary Had a Little Lamb, not something you prepared for. And yet you have the confidence to do it and the ability to just be us wherever that is. That seems to be a big point too of successful life. Mm-hmm. Just willing to, all right, well, yeah, you might have 50 years or whatever, 20 years of this experience, but I'm going to do this thing because I'm going to make my contribution and let's just go forward.
Yeah. And do the things that are scary.
I I love that
Yeah.
you said successful life, David, because a lot of these principles are things that go well beyond code.
Yes.
And yeah, just the idea of, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be successful at being who I am, and I'm just going to apply these things wherever I go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Well, unless we're going to get an encore, I think we probably ought to go do Pics.
Yes.
So I'm going to make Eric go first since we haven't had him on for a while.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Eric, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, I've been collecting them too, actually. Yeah, I've got 3 picks today. The first one, I didn't realize that my life was incomplete until I recently went to Portugal and had a dessert called pastel de nata. And oh my gosh, I probably ate 40 of them. And these are like these little tiny, you got to Google it, pastel de nata, N-A-T-A. And it's this little pastry that has custard inside it. Oh man, it's the reason to move there. Yeah, Catherine.
Yes.
Right. Second thing that I've been really, really, really getting into, because I've been on long flights, 10-hour flights, and so I download like whole series of shows on my iPad so I can watch them on the flight, is The Expanse. And The Expanse is an amazing show that it's a sci-fi show that's kind of Battlestar Galactica-esque, but it has such an amazing world in it. It seems like they could take it in so many different directions, but it's on Amazon, I believe, and The Expanse. And then finally, the company that I'm working with now, Code Sponsor, has been brought into the family of Consensus. Now, Consensus is a company that is geared to push the Ethereum ecosystem forward. And if you don't know Ethereum, it's a blockchain, and it's similar to Bitcoin. The difference, though, is that Ethereum is to, or let's say Bitcoin is to calculator as Ethereum is to supercomputer. And that's really what it comes down to. And most recently, I was in Denver at a hackathon, and I was amazed on some of the things that people came up with. One of them that was very interesting to me is that they have a way to be able to track blood donations on the blockchain so that you are absolutely 100% certain where that blood was sourced from. And to think of the possibilities on that in third world countries where you can always know like the full history and the actual information on the donor, like their age, their, are they smoker, like all that stuff you can have just easily once you move this type of information into the blockchain. And so anyway, I really am blown away by the power of Ethereum and the blockchain. So, I think that we're going to be talking about that a little bit in the Ruby Hack conference coming up in April. So those are my picks.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know somebody who's speaking?
Also,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say to talk about HIPAA and how that would apply, just protecting the person's identity or information. Not right now, but just in the talk.
Well, it's actually quite easy. You have, so basically what you would do is that information would derive from a source, but the source would only allow certain data across. So there will be no personal identifiable information. You don't need another name to know if they have, I don't know what their blood type is or if they're a smoker.
Yeah. Now, is somebody giving a
same
talk on blockchain at Ruby Hack? He says with a smile.
Yep. Yeah, I don't. Not me. I'm actually speaking at Ruby Hack, but I'm speaking on why funding open source is hard and the options that a developer has to be able to get funding for their open source.
I'm speaking on blockchain and Ruby at Ruby Hack. So.
Oh, I didn't know. That's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Oh, very cool.
I thought you knew that. I thought that's
Ruby Hack.
why you brought it up. So,
No, I didn't, but I'm like super excited that you are. We gotta have lunch, man.
Yeah, we do, because I have a start, but I have a feeling, with you working with Ethereum and Consensus, you can probably give me some ideas that I wouldn't come up with on my own. So
yeah, that's up.
All right, David, what are your picks?
I have a couple today. Just they're based on our conversation today. So we talked about music we like to listen to, and I put a link to a 10-hour loop of the song I like to listen to when I code. It just puts me in that zone pretty well. So it's Marconi Union waitlist. And the other one is just a lot of fun. It's like a 2-year-old thing. You've probably all seen it, but it's a neat little machine. They made marbles and wood and creativity and music. So Wintergotten. So it's this marble machine. So I've got a link. They're both YouTube links. So watch those, and you'll thank me later.
All right, Dave, what are your picks?
So, my first pick is so it's really all just one pick. Heat shrink tubing and a air gun, like a heat gun, which is basically like a man hair dryer, but it's used for shooting or shrinking tubing. So I use it on electrical components. I've been kind of getting that kick or fire start up again. So I've been playing around with electricity and stuff, and heat shrink tubing makes it so much easier to close off and wrap up connections.
So what did you use that on besides wiring? Come on, you had to have put two pencils together or something like that, right?
The heat gun? No.
Yeah. Dude, I would be connecting things like pens and anything that I could find. I would be like, okay, you are no one.
It's not a glue gun. It's a heat gun. So it's basically like a hair dryer.
I know. But you stick the tubing around it, right? And then you shrink it down. Those things are fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I've only done on electrical components, wires and stuff.
Chicken.
Sorry. I know. I'm sorry. I never thought about combining pencils together into one pencil. All right, that's my pick.
So I'm going to jump in here with a few picks. One of the things music-wise that I've been listening to a lot lately is the soundtrack from The Greatest Showman. And it's a terrific movie. It was funny because my wife went and saw it, and then 2 days later she had to take my kids to see it, and I had something going on. So I went and saw it when they got back because my 2-year-old, couldn't go. And then on on Saturday, I took my 10-year-old daughter and we went to the sing-along version. If you want an awesome movie experience and you should go to the regular movie once before you go to the sing-along version, and then listen to the soundtrack a bunch of times so that you kind of know how the songs go. But man, the soundtrack is amazing, and the sing-along version was probably the best movie experience I've had in a while. So I'm super excited about that. I'm also going to self-servingly pick a few other things. I mentioned React Dev Summit. We're also starting a React podcast. So reactroundup.com will get you to the podcast. We're going to release the first episode the first week in March. Same with our Vue.js podcast, Views on Vue. So if you're doing front-end dev and you're getting into that, then check that out. And finally, probably toward the end of March, we'll be releasing the Elixir podcast. I'm still pulling the panel together with that and getting some of the other logistics done. But I have the artwork together. I have the domain. So definitely going to be checking that out and having some fun with that. Catherine, what are your picks?
So my first pick definitely has to be a general shout out to public school music education. This is how I got started in music. And it was just, I think it was my elementary school music teacher who, in the 6th grade, when I sang Memory from Cats in the school talent show, pulled my mom aside and said, hey, you should, think about putting your daughter in voice lessons. And she changed my life. And all of the music education I had in my public schools changed my life and prepared me for this second career in addition to my first career as a professional musician. And unfortunately, in this day and age, this is the first thing to get cut. And it is so wrong and so short-sighted. And so I have to give a shout out to public school music education. If you have the funds, then donate to organizations that are helping. Use your vote to support candidates that support arts and education. My second pick has more to do with computer science fundamentals. There's an amazing blog series called Base CS that is written by Vaidehi Joshi, who also went to Flatiron School. And for any, not just boot camp grads, but anybody. This is such an amazing blog series, and it's actually a podcast and a video series now as well that explain those computer science concepts in such an incredible way. And this kind of leads me into my third pick. And this might be an old thing for y'all. This book came out a bit ago, but it's Ruby Under a Microscope by Pat Shaughnessy. And I just finished it a few weeks ago, so it was new to me. And what I loved about it is that because I'm a boot camp grad, my first entry into computer science was through Ruby. So a lot of those low-level things and concepts were completely abstracted away. And then you kind of go back and you try to teach yourself those computer science fundamentals. But they're just these abstract things like linked lists and memory allocation. Those are things that you don't really have to think about when you're writing Ruby. So when you learn about them, they're in this abstract way. And it was always harder to really cement those ideas in my mind. And what Ruby Under a Microscope did was it showed me how Ruby under the hood was using all of these things that I was learning about and giving me all these great real life use cases that really helped cement those concepts for me.
Awesome. I just want to shout out to, there are some listeners who have listened to the show for quite a long time. The podcast for Base CS, Vaidehi's co-host is Saranyat Bark, who used to be a panelist on this show. So if you miss Saran and you don't get enough of her on Code Newbie, go check out that show. It is actually really, really well done.
It is, definitely.
All right. Well, one last thing. Do you have a blog or Twitter or anywhere else where people can go and see what you're working on these days?
Yes. So I'm probably most active on Twitter, CC Meyers 324. I should do more blog posts now that you say that. I'm like, yeah.
No
but you
pressure.
Can also catch me
at
CatherineMyers.com. Also where you can catch me.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for coming. This was a really, really terrific conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're awesome.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we will catch you all next week.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.